I think you cannot go drastically into streaming because you are at the risk of living outside the older generation that still enjoys their big screen experience where they say, I want to watch the game in my sofa with my beer in a big screen and enjoy that experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the music industry, right? But, it would be, interesting to hear just off record from a, music label executive of, are they negotiating with Spotify or Spotify saying, this is what we will pay you, because they are the biggest distributor of music, right? Yeah. And so the leverage is with Spotify now. The pendulum is the power structure has kind of swung the other way. And so I do think that there is a big case study or example of the music industry that the sports industry is learning from. But you're also seeing that, if that swings all the way with a technology company, then you're going to lose your leverage. And so in a lot of ways, you have to balance. But again, it comes down to how are you creating, one, it's just engaging with the next generation live, but two, it's like how are you creating additional revenue sources, right?
And in your experience, you had a lot of deal experience and negotiating rights with all sort of rights holders. For you, what's the biggest difference that you've seen from the US rights holders versus the international ones?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I was on a panel of the game of global sport, and we were talking about the game of soccer and football as the US prepares to be the host nation for the World Cup next year. And it's an interesting dichotomy because you have the two of the major leagues here, the NFL and NBA, and they're trying to be global, right? And then with the game of soccer and football, you have the opposite problem of taking a global sport and trying to grow it here in the US, right? So it's very interesting. I think that when you're looking at from a just fan perspective, right? It's whether it be Cristiano or Messi or Sonny, right? We were joking about how the Spurs signed Sonny, you got the entire country behind you, right? I do think that players and individuals have a lot more power, right, and influence, right, to move audience. I'd be curious to think of just pick the brain of any front office to see that in the future is social following or distribution potential via that individual. Take into account how much you pay the salary, of the player, right? Because it no longer becomes NBA on ESPN. It becomes LeBron James on ESPN, like that plays on the Lakers. That's on ESPN, right? And so, in certain ways, it's like kids don't care if it's on ESPN or TNT. All they care about is watching LeBron James or Steph Curry playing. And so, I think it's an interesting kind of vantage. In terms of just the global, like growing the global sport, NFL and NBA obviously is, NBA is investing in Africa a ton because a lot of the top players are coming from that, as well as Eastern Europe. I think it's very telling that I think in the last 5 years, the MVP of the NBA has not been an American, right? And so that is a testament to how the game has truly grown from a global basis. And but I also do think that this, the opportunity for soccer or football to grow in the U.S. is very promising. I do think that there needs to be changes, structurally done. But the one signal I see, I have a 2-year-old, right? The first game that the first two sports that he gravitates towards, soccer, football, and baseball, right? I think baseball because he just likes swinging a bat. Yeah. But soccer, right? So soccer is tremendously, participatory. It's probably one of the biggest youth sports segments here in the U.S. as well as globally. But I do think that creates a nice pipeline. But I also, find myself being in this U.S. world, U.S. mindset. I try. My parents live in Seoul, Korea, right? And so I try to take some of the insights that Korea market has, and how does that inform me, here in the U.S. But I do think that in Europe or in globally, fandom has tremendously still been about like where are you from, where your family is from, where you grew up. Right?
It's that historic legacy of the club. You're very romantic about that idea.
And it's romantic and it's personal, right? It's familial, right?
It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's tradition, right? I still don't understand how people decide to be an Atleti fan versus like a Real fan. But it's like you live in the same city and you're your enemies, right? Just very much like New York Yankees and Mets, right? Where if you're born in Queens, you're a Mets fan. If you're born in the Bronx, you're a Yankees fan, right? But I do think that fandom globally is very much familial, right? You're losing a lot of that here, right? You're seeing kids in New York wearing Steph Curry jerseys, and like I overpronounce it too. Of course, like you see a lot of Jude Bellingham jerseys in Barcelona, I'm sure, because the kids like Jude, right? But I do see just differences in the type of fandom and how you. But
that's happening also in Europe. Yeah. If you tell me 10 years ago, and this is something I say a lot, if you tell me 10 years ago that I would see kids in a city like Madrid with all the football tradition that you have in Madrid, with more than 7 teams in the top level, wearing Al Nassr shirts.
Yeah.
I will tell you 10 years ago that you're crazy. Like,
of course.
I didn't even knew that they play football in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, of course.
And now you go to the park and you see out of 20 kids wearing football shirts, maybe 10, 20% wearing Al Nassr shirt, just because of Cristiano.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Al Nassr went to the global stage by taking Cristiano. Same thing with Inter Miami.
Yeah.
Inter Miami, and the best, and I think the best example is when Messi joined Inter Miami, they got 800,000 Instagram followers in one day. They made it like 12 million.
Yeah.
And that was just the power of Messi and the fandom that brings behind.
Yeah, Messi also did increase, the MLS season pass 200,000 subs. But where I say that there's structural changes is you have this lightning in a bottle opportunity, right? The Apple MLS deal happened prior to Messi joining, right? It kind of, an angel fell on your lap, right? So what do you do with that moment, right? You try to make Messi as accessible as possible, right? And so again, I am not a decision maker at MLS or Apple. I have a lot of friends there. But what I would have done is I would have put Inter Miami games on the Messi channel. On the Messi YouTube channel.
That's the future model.
Yeah,
I'm convinced that that's the future model.
Yeah, and you're seeing emerging, leagues like Kings League, right?
Yeah,
is trying to shake up that model a little bit, but Kings League is still an emerging league. The MLS, EPL, these are establishments, right? And I would love to see much more of this new-minded thinking from the establishments, because that is 100%. The only way you're 100%. Going to capture that kid in Madrid who's wearing an Al Nassr jersey, right? So,
going to the example of the Kings League, I really believe that the success of the Kings League, it has nothing to do with the format of the competition. So the problem with sports connecting with younger audiences is not a problem of the format of the content or how it is produced. The success of the Kings League comes from the distribution strategy, relying on the creators to distribute the content, connecting, engaging with the people.
It's rethinking the pipes.
It's rethinking the pipes, exactly. And I think sports need to really look at that and don't think too much about, what I'm going to do to try to change a little bit the format. We've seen very new formats and interesting formats develop in very traditional sport. The example of cricket with the 200 and these things. But I think that the answer for the sport industry in general has been, we need to connect with the younger audiences. We need to connect with more people. We're going to add more games to try to make it more
quicker and stuff
or make
like
it quicker. Forget about it.
Yeah,
I really think that it's the distribution strategy and the engagement that you put into the life. I 100% agree.
And on the flip side, it's like you see a lot of the emerging leagues, and this may or may not be controversial. The minute I see an emerging league take a TV deal, the first deal.
Forget about it.
I get sad, right? Because yes, I get it, because the TV dollar is rich, right? And you are a startup, right? And so you have to fund your startup and bring revenue. But if you take that TV dollar, right? Here's one example. American football, NFL, is the most popular sport in the nation by far, right?
Yeah.
If you say the top 10 most viewed shows, in the US, they will command 80 to 90% of that every year, depending on an election year, right? And election years, every 4 years, election nights, some debates will get up there, right? But NFL is American football is the most popular sport in the country. But for how many years have we tried to make spring football happen? XFL, AFL, all the other formats out there. And one of the things that they do is they take TV money. You know what I mean? Because I get it. You want to fill the TV spots in the spring, right? And so people who are yearning for the NFL, and when Super Bowl, happens, it's such a high and there's a low, and so there is this desire to watch more American football, right? But it has not gone well for decades now, right? And so my point of view is, if that doesn't work for the most popular sport in the nation, then how does any other emerging league have a chance to succeed here? And again, I'm saying something very polarizing, but at the same time, it's, if you want to have a chance to succeed, right? To your point, yes, the format and new format is you see TGL.
Interesting. Yeah,
you're seeing that with TGL.
Yeah, it's
but
interesting.
I think the most important part is distribution. How are you reaching your fans differently and not reusing the old playbook? And guess what? The Giants are struggling with the old playbook, which is the old TV playbook, right? And so I think for any new emerging league, you have to rethink, okay, how do we think about distribution? And it can't just be like, we're going to throw a few creators in, make the game shorter, right?
No.
It's going to be about, how are we marketing this? How are we connecting with fans live? And how are we getting much more active involvement in it? And I think it always comes down to the pipes, to the distribution, right? And, it's with any construction, right? If you have to repipe things, it's the most expensive task in a house, right? But you know what? We're in this period where we have to redo the pipes. And I'm not saying destroy the pipes.
Just say, redo them.
Yeah, you got to redo them.